What is going on, everybody? This is SCPCRNP, aka Lack of Lepers. Thank you so much for joining our weeknightly-ish reaction stream series. I want to thank you for showing up. As always, feel free to jump on in if you got any thoughts. A lot going on in this space right now. There's quite an elephant in the room. If you don't know, Wikidot has been down most of the day. So that is causing people to get a little uncomfortable. Certainly we're hoping and wishing the best for the Wikidot team, who are surely having a worse time than anyone else. So that is going on, but this is sort of not really affecting this stream. So that's really the sort of topic we'll tackle and discuss on our Saturday show, which is SCP Meta, which is 11 a.m. Central Standard Time. So we'll talk about it there. Because we got a job to do. So hopefully it'll be back up by the time we do that stream. Speaking of jobs to do, tomorrow night, which is Friday, we typically would be doing and will be doing our gauntlet-style 3-hour review of all the SCP Wiki articles that came out this week. And Wikidot's been down for a day, so I've had a nice little mandatory vacation, and I almost just very thankful. It's like a rain day or something like that. But the good news is that we were pretty much caught up. There were a couple of articles that had come out that I hadn't had a chance to look at quite yet. But that was really it. We've got a decent number. We'll see. If it comes up, I'll certainly catch up. But if not, we may have, a little less articles to go through than usual. And in fact, this week it was a little less active of a week, I think, as far as article postings were concerned, as it was. So we'll see how that works. That will be tomorrow night. We'll still do it. Maybe just get out of there a little earlier. I don't know. So anyway, I want to thank you once again for coming. So let me get the screen shared, and we'll pick up right where we left off. And we may even finish this tonight. We are listening to the Simply Creative People podcast. This is episode 4, talking about the 3 Moons Initiative. And so far, I'd say this has been relatively enjoyable. I think that it has dipped in a little bit of quality just compared to last episodes, excluding episode 2, which is kind of like a diet episode. But I didn't really expect this to be the case, but this listening to episode 4 has mostly devolved into me complaining about Harry Blank. And so while that's a bummer, it's also not really that surprising to me because, once again, the decision to onboard Harry Blank was, I think a rather bad one. So I'll try to keep that to a minimum. But and if I do have more things to say about Harry Blank, there'll be a point to it, some sort of philosophical point, and it not just be me not liking somebody. So let's get into it.
To Corbinic. And it's got 2 moons on it. The 2 Moons Initiative. Because we realize as we're reading, if we've been reading along, this is one of the Earths that got teleported. In fact, this is the last Earth that got teleported. Right. The one that made it the 3 Moons Initiative.
Look at me.
And it's an apocalyptic
wow,
story
dude.
of
Come on,
how that
come on,
Earth
man.
ended up getting teleported to Corbinic as everything went wrong, making the 2 Moons Initiative the 3 Moons Initiative. And it ends, as all good cycles.
It was just a habit. I didn't even think about it. This is how sad life is right now. While we're here, just because we're here, why not? We're here. On the 19th of May, 2022, Wikidot servers have been hit by hackers. All traces lead to Russian Federation, because we don't know how the hackers got into our servers, nor how much of our infrastructure has been compromised. We had to move very carefully. At the time of writing, we have regained access to all our resources, and we are gaining ground, but we still need to examine all servers and configuration before re-enabling Wikidot. All the data, files, and database is intact, and no data loss has occurred. Thank you for your patience, and we humbly ask for some more. It's been a very difficult day for us. Yeah. Hard day for the team, and it's far from over, so keep your fingers crossed. Keep your fingers crossed. I will keep you posted on this page. So it's almost like this kind of 2-step of hey, everything's fine, but, pray for us, kind of thing. And this very, very strange. I have no clue why the Russian Federation would be taking down, things about Wikidot. I mean, it could be just Amazon Web Services, which I think Wikidot operates through. This may be just sort of collateral in a larger attempt of something. I'm going to go with that because honestly, the whole Russia thing just it kind of smells a little funny. Certainly could be that, I guess, but it just seems, I don't know. It's just something about it is I'm not too sure what to think about it. So actually, I went into the Wikidot Discord, which you should be in if you don't already visit that place. And I was trying to figure out, hey, does anybody know why it is that they think that it's Russia? And I haven't gotten a reply yet. I've gotten a reply, just no actual answers. So we'll see. I mean, 'cause that's, I don't know. But oh well. You know what we can do? This is a little trick initiative. That would be SCP. So we can go here. We can go here. We can click on Schwa. And thank goodness, April 8th. So I wonder if this hack had anything to do with the fact that yesterday was probably the worst day of the stock market for quite some time. I don't think so, but you never know.
Well, stories do.
Before you read the last note.
Yeah.
So it's like a pill-shaped object. It's white. Yeah. It's like impossible to damage. And at the beginning, it says that there is no possible editing to this article. And then they show all these different iterations where over decades, the Foundation thinks at first, okay, well, anything that gets within 500 meters or 500 feet, whatever, disappears. And, it's implied goes to Corbinic, but you don't know. It doesn't really make any sense. It's just everything disappears around it. And then suddenly they think, it's actually been neutralized because now things aren't disappearing. And then finally, during, far in the future, during some Z-class, end of the world class scenario, the object flights into space and then teleports the planet. And the way that you are cued in that this is then them floating around Corbinic is that somebody took like a cyanide pill and just ended up vomiting blood. Somebody else tried to slit their wrists and then watched it as they healed.
That was, okay.
So isn't like Corbinic kind of like the end of death scenario? Because, I mean, it's a little different, obviously, because you can, I guess, still technically kind of like die, but I mean, it's not really like a functional death, so I don't know. It almost seems like it presaged that. I don't know when the death, end of death hub came about, but they seem to have some overlap, and I wonder if, I'm sure someone has done a sort of a combination of the two. I'm sure that someone has explored both the end of death and what Corbinic would, look like differently or not at all differently before. That just seems like an obvious pairing.
Since you had to correct me for not giving the article full credit, I have to get you now. No, the guy slit his wrists and his office filled with blood, so right. He couldn't type properly on his keyboard, and everybody thought he was joking.
Oh, right, and somebody responds to him as like, this isn't the time for your joke.
He's just like, keyboard covered in blood.
And then the article ends with the final iteration, which is actually our Foundation finding the same object. And what?
Yes, because we've got one copy, and it's now 3 Moons Initiative, and the implication is, if the shit hits the fan, we'll be the 4th moon, right? And the 3 Moons Initiative also has a message for the Foundation. And the message is, as I said, one of my favorite pieces of literature on the wiki. The note is, Foundation. They always address them as Foundation. Foundation, for the gods' sake, we do want to keep humanity safe. Ever since we escaped on that first moon, that's been our goal. But let's be honest, humanity keeps repeating the same mistakes that got us here in the first place. Do your job, because if you don't, we'll do it for you. And we have no idea what the fuck we're doing.
Is that really what it says?
Just because it starts off.
There's no way that's really what it says. That would be a compositional mistake, in my opinion.
In that very self-serious ending note trope of like, this is important, humanity must be protected, you're going to die, and then
we have no idea what the fuck.
Amazing.
It's that sense of contrast, that perfect.
Like I said, Dave Ufool usually is a master of that. I don't just from hearing that, I don't necessarily think that that was a good example of that. That seems a little ham-fisted. Hey-o.
sense of where to contrast the tone that characterizes what David Boole writes.
And the next one is just as much the same, only for once it does not involve serious violence. Although it does involve the implication of it. Yes. What happens is there's a ritual.
How you doing tonight?
And the article, and this is 3768, and the article describes what you need to do the ritual, and it's like colloidal silver and like pure 376, the implication of it. What happens is there's a ritual, and the article, and this is 3768, and the article describes what you need to do the ritual, and it's like colloidal silver and like purified salt. I'm getting the details wrong, but the point is it's set up
I made that
like
ugly
magic ritual. And if you do it around a radio station,
I didn't forget. I did not
then the
forget.
radio
I'm just
station will start
copying.
broadcasting radio from the 3 Moons Initiative. And it's
I love this, the way he does this with the Conprox, where it's almost like a callback to the first one, where the Conprox are this crazy thing, but it's for something completely unrelated and crazier.
yeah. So like this one establishes that this is a ritual you can use to hear broadcasts from the afterlife, and immediately the details of the anomaly are not important because what matters is the message that are being sent, which is a trick I like to use in Victim all the time.
He takes something that would be somebody else's whole article and he uses it as his excuse to do something better. It's like showing off in the most brilliant way possible.
I like that.
And
That's cool.
I don't know if it was conscious or not, but I feel like I kind of lived this through Victim stuff because so often I set up something to be a cursed media, cursed DVD or VHS, and then immediately it's not important what the curse is because that doesn't matter as much as the content matters.
It's a delivery system.
Yeah, so I'm already sort of getting this like fun little thing that happens with these articles, which is that this catchphrase, see, in the SCP Foundation equivalent, it's like irreducible, secure, contain, protect. I mean, and occasionally you'll get a we secure, we contain, we protect. But it's really, there's not a lot of variation in there. And it's almost giving off that sort of like irreducibility of something like a Bible passage. For example, you always hear the phrase, my Lord and Savior. You never hear the phrase, my Savior and Lord. There's something about the configuration that is immutable. You can't actually like get in there and rearrange the innards of the thing. So it's irreducible. It's like this package that is simply just transmitted and then sort of reproduced. And so you get that with the secure, contain, protect. But this is interesting because when you see this kind of show up, we've already seen it a few times. It has a little bit of variation in there. It'll kind of give like something a little unique to this actual article. So I like that. It's just a little bit of variation. It's not as just straight shot kind of stuff. So I think that's pretty cool.
This is a news broadcast that is being hosted by Julie Niang, and it's sort of like, is this a relation to the president? It's unclear, but it also boasts of the fact that she has been at her station.
I want to go off on a little bit of a tangent just for this, because the description is a ritualistic procedure carried out through the use of yada, yada, yada. So I think on the last stream on Friday, I was talking about this new Admonition Hub article, which I think is SCP-6844, I want to say. And I glossed over it because I have too much to say about it. And then I ended up writing, just to shill myself, I suppose, for a second here. I ended up writing a article about it, and this was last night, when I should have been maybe looking at Wikidoc articles instead, especially if I had known that it was about to be unavailable for a while. But this is an article that I wrote that just was sort of like my thoughts, just almost like pocketbook sort of notes that are somewhat cleaned up and put into a blog post. This is my blog, by the way, and given obviously a very pleasant to look at image. And 6488. And so it sort of dances around SCP-6488 and one other article that I read last week, which was a Chinese article, which was SCP-CN1109. And so just using those two in a sort of choreography, I sort of staged just my thoughts and like the bigger things that I've gotten out of this practice, this exercise of reading every single SCP Wiki article and trying to really dig into the article, and what have I learned from that sort of study, that sort of microscopy. And so in this, we talk about a lot of things, and one of the things that we talk about are essentially what amount to a checklist for bad pataphysical articles. So just common pitfalls that all bad pataphysics usually commit. These are offenses that they all commit. For example, recasting of mundane IRL actions as if they are complex when they're not. Another fault is recursive, ultimately circular anomalies. The other is CSS crutches, unnecessarily complicated jargon and proto-babble, or pato-babble, excuse me. Over-reliance on pataphysics' past greatest hits. And in this section, this is where I'm going. In this section, I'll just read this for a second. The issues seen in both CN 1109 and admonition articles on the whole, not every single one of them, are really the common pitfalls of the informal subgenre of pataphysics on the whole. These include, but are not limited to, yada, yada, yada. Recursive, ultimately circular anomalies, as is the case in SCP-3309, and then the couple that we're looking at with the Admonition Hub article in there. The pataphysical anomaly is commonly just itself, the article as a placeholder for something else. The telltale sign is a description featuring a pataphysical technique as either a tool, a weapon, or a procedure, which is the case with all of these articles, and is quite common in pataphysics. And so I want to just, now that I've mentioned, observed this in this article, I wanted just to mention that this is an example of that done right. So in articles such as SCP-3309, such as SCP-CN1109, and SCP-6747, you have this basically self-casting of the anomaly as itself, very much like what you have here. So, for example, we here have SCP is a ritualistic procedure carried out through the use. And so the difference, I think, between someone like, once again, Dave Ufool, who I think is, echelons better than the authors of the pieces that I just mentioned, basically takes this and doesn't sort of navel gaze with it, instead of it being about itself and being sort of like hyper fixated on its own mythos and its own mythology. It instead uses the very simple ingredient of a ritualistic procedure to go somewhere else, somewhere outside of this almost glass cap, this glass ceiling of what pataphysics has to be confined to in a lot of ways. And so I just appreciate that, and I wanted to bring that out, if only just to say that it can be done well. You can have a self-referential sort of article, sort of anomaly as the foundational description happening here, and it not become what is essentially just a detailed tour of somebody's body in the mirror. You know what I'm saying? So good job to this guy.
And doing broadcasts for like the last 300 years or something. And there's a lot of snippets, and I'm not going to read them all because they're very funny, and it does some really excellent world building at the same time as being funny. But the best part of it is towards the end, where there's a broadcast where Julian Yang says, "To no one's surprise, the Central Cabal's unanimous passing of the mandatory Pan-Corbinese Human Sterilization Act, or, and then they give an acronym, has been causing controversy among colonies, resulting in demonstrations across the lunar capital. Opponents, including the Child of Heaven Coalition, claim that the right to responsibly conceive children is inalienable." President Yang, who is expected to sign into law.
See, that's another thing about this, is that unlike something like I hate to rag on pataphysics, it's just such a nice contrast point for us to kind of jump off of, as opposed to something like pataphysics, where it sort of tries very hard to take a very mundane action like typing on the SCP Wiki or upvoting on the SCP Wiki or locking a page on the SCP Wiki, and try very desperately to sort of make that as profound as possible, just infuse it, just like pump it full of like acronyms and cool sounding names of things and pictures of space engineering, projects, bits of particle accelerator engineering stuff, instead of doing like that, just to sort of like fortify itself into something intellectually substantive, as opposed to doing something like that. You have something like this where it actually, this is very, very deep. I mean, this is what we just listened to is deeper than I think anything in something like SCP-6747, or deeper than anything in something like this new one, SCP-6488. And once again, this article, this SCP-3768, doesn't bill itself as high concept. It doesn't bill itself. It doesn't give its own sort of like scratch its own ass, sniff its own ass, saying that hey, I'm really smart and intelligent. But this passage right here about this ethical question, this moral ethical question of this sort of grandfather society that knows best for this, trying to take away the right to responsibly conceive children. I mean, that's really deep. That has more philosophical bite to it than any of these, completely sort of like self-referential, sort of almost egotistically recursive pataphysics, sort of descriptions, sort of anomalies that are cast in order to have pataphysics do what it wants to do, which it almost has to do. It's almost the only direction that pataphysics can go in if you go in the direction of taking it seriously. There's really only one road in that direction. It doesn't really meander. It's just kind of straight, and it kind of leads you to this overinflated attempt to, pump profundity into something that just, I'm sorry, but it's just not the right place to put it. It's not profound. So that's my little rant.
On Tuesday, released the following statement. The world we live in now was meant to be the logical conclusion of our lives on Earth. To create new life here would be to create mortal life. When this happens, and it has happened all too often, the polarity of death is reversed, and the departed mortal leaves to live forever in Korbennik's so-called sister universe. The tricky bit with this, of course, is that our world is designed for immortals, and theirs isn't. There are two inevitable results: a guaranteed living nightmare drifting off into deep space, or in the custody of the Foundation as with several extant case studies, or the presence of an unkillable human being on Earth with all the potential violence it would entail.
Brilliant.
And then Julie steps back in.
Frickin' brilliant. You take it to a logical place, a logical conclusion. It's like, it's the difference between going out and saying like, hey, I'm going to build the best, I'm going to go on this beach and I'm going to find like the coolest, the most, valuable silver dollar ever. And then, so you have to like contrive everything to find that because you've made this like promise, this like grandiose statement. That's pataphysics. And then you have something like this where it's like, okay, let's just kind of see what we can find and just make the best thing out of the ingredients that we have with us. And so that's what this author has done here with, basically just taking these things very, very, almost deceptively simply to their sort of logical conclusions, which end up being tremendously deep. I mean, this is seriously good critical thinking, going on here on the part of the author. And it's just, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to rag on people or schools of composition, but I just feel like I have to sort of contrast this with something like pataphysics in order to bring the point out sufficiently, which is just that, the more you have to try to explain something, the more you have to try to convolute something as profound and intelligent, the less profound and intelligent it probably is, and unavoidably so, I would say.
In addition, the Three Moons press secretary, Lyndon B. Johnson, has insisted that the sterilization measures are painless, non-invasive, and finally, some good news about this, will not affect libido.
And that really does matter to the Corbinese, absolutely.
I mean, I think it would matter to everybody.
It would matter to everybody, but they get busy quite frequently.
But it does.
Do y'all remember what Rounderhouse and the Yurt Boys rated the Three Moon Initiative when it came to how much they got it? Because it seems like they'd be getting it according to that statement.
Right. But it does make sense that, this is the afterlife in which we all get to exist forever, and we have a society, and we can't keep having babies. There's already billions of us.
Yes. In fact,
Gotta get that birth control.
in a later article, they do accidentally kill some horrible, gigantic, immortal Russian
No, it's this
people.
one.
And is it in this
Yeah,
one that
so
happens?
the next bit is that, oh my goodness, the Witch Queen of Bogle Mountain has died of liver failure, which is surprising because we thought she was immortal. But that means she's going to show up on Earth. And so it ends with a hilarious warning from the Three Moons Initiative sent directly to the Foundation, probably through the Horseshoe Crab.
We have some bad
drone.
news.
That,
good.
she's probably appeared somewhere around Jupiter, and if you guys work on it now, you could probably stop her from landing on Earth. But that's where she's.
Wouldn't it be funny if there was a cross link to that DJ Cactus article that has to do with Jupiter's red spot in this? That's not what this is it? That would be way too cool. I often feel like everybody just rushes to cross-link to that article by DJ Cactus, which I think, unless I'm mistaken, I think that was really in his catalog. If you go through it like sort of chronologically, one of the first articles that I think actually did really, really rather well. And you have a ton of people who are trying desperately, I think, to cross-link into that. But I don't think this is it. No, this is another Three Moons initiative, although it's actually Double Moon initiative. But that would be, I think the WikiWalk team is really missing out on an opportunity just to throw that in there, just for the fuck of it.
Heading, and it ends with this bit, and if she does cause your extinction, well, when you get to the great meat hall of Sakalovi, drinks are on us. You are watched, you are protected, and win or lose, you're loved.
I love when they start introducing the variations. It's beautiful.
Love it.
Yeah, that one gets.
So, I mean, once again, just like I said last time, these aren't like stinger line. These aren't like one-liners. They're not. They're just really, really pointed endings that are, compositionally, robust, really. They're not just like a little thin dagger poked out there. I mean, these are like just real, definitive endings that the whole article beckons. In just a really a very robust way, as opposed to a stinger or a one-liner at the end, which the article does not do that for. It is simply sort of a switcheroo, sort of a gotcha, sort of a you didn't see that coming. These things are they're not like a switcheroo. They're very, very grounded in what the article is doing.
Picked up on with a tail later when they go to find another horrifying beast to send into space to fight her, but it's all just part of this horrible. It's horrible.
It's a great word.
It's horrible.
Horrible.
I mean, that one's so much fun because
it's a good word. I like that. That was an accident.
It's all for this joke and for the implication that this horrible thing is flying towards Earth, but it also sets up this really interesting world building where it's like,
world building.
This is an existing society.
Do you hear this guy?
Sorry, first of all, it's all for this joke and for the implication that this horrible thing is flying towards Earth, but it also sets up this really interesting world building where it's like, listen, guys, this is an existing society in which.
Hold on a second. Hang out with me for a second. This is how you do it. So that was an A that he was singing, that he hit right there in his lilt.
But it also sets up this really interesting world building where.
Okay, one more time.
And for the implication that this horrible thing is flying towards Earth, but it also sets up this really interesting world building.
This is really interesting. Ding. Okay, so the guy goes more than an octave in 2 words. So he goes from a G, like a middle G, I don't know, like G, I don't know this shit, like G1, G2, G3, I don't know. He goes from a G all the way up to that A. That's over an octave. That's 2 semitones up from an octave in the span of like half of a second. Incredible range, incredible vocal range on Grigory Karpin. He should be doing some opera while he's up here.
Joke and for the implication that this horrible thing is flying towards Earth, but it also sets up this really interesting world building where it's like, well, listen, guys, this is an existing society in which people.
Man, that's like 14 semitone jump, baby.
Like the fuck, like they do everywhere, and we cannot keep having babies. And so he
did it again.
This brilliant thing of like all these rich world building.
I'm not making
that are just
fun.
Like these throwaway lines.
It's literally impressive. Like I don't know if I could do that. That's just quite a jump. So great job to Grigory Karpin. It almost sounds like puberty, but it's not. It's talent.
Because they're not the point of an article. The point of the article is to make you laugh or creep you out.
Yes.
But also, I feel like Corbinick is a real place. Like, it feels like a real setting.
Exactly.
Yeah, he casually builds the world in the background while he's doing the other impressive things. It's incredible.
Right. Which is another difference what makes this more mature writing than something like these pataphysical attempts that we've been seeing through something like the Admonition Hub, which is just so blatantly expository. I mean, just an exposition dump, with really no interesting hook, no interesting moment, that draws you into it. So we can't do it now because the wiki is down still, but this new article, this SCP-6488, I mean, it is just like straight exposition with little interjections of dialogue, but not long dialogue. And none of those moments are particularly, I think, hook engaging stuff. But this new admonition article, I mean, it literally, my biggest issue with it was the pacing and was just the tremendous amount of unsupported exposition that is just sort of like flooded into the article for about like the first 90% of the read. It's like going down a road that's bland, that's very straight. There's nothing to see. But the sunshine, it's morning or something, and the sunshine is just glaringly into your eyes as you're trying to drive down this road, and your friend in the passenger seat on this super duper long road trip is playing music that you just absolutely don't like at way too loud of a volume. That's sort of like what it was like reading SCP-6488 for me. And I might have to read it again just because, but it's so damn long. I mean, I really don't look forward to doing that. But it was very excruciating to get into. It was a very excruciating read. And I think most of that is the very crass treatment that the authors gave the exposition, the world building, as opposed to something like this, which is what Harry Blank is saying, which I agree with, is that this is way more finessed, it's way more skillful, way more talented, way more artisan of world building that occurs almost in a sort of like almost pseudo-dissolved fashion where it's this background radiation that sort of bleeds through just whenever you notice it. It's almost like just the background of a scene that's just so completely ornate and elaborate, but that the camera's not really focusing on, but that you can still kind of maybe notice, when nothing else is happening. And so this sort of really, I think, is what world building does when it's really well, is that it sort of gives you this backdrop. Once again, these new articles, especially this new Admonition Hub article, which I'm not trying to bash too much. I mean, there are things about that I like. I think that it just tries to make that sort of background radiation world building a little too prominent, and it comes off as just a large cinder, series of cinder block like exposition drops. So once again, I mean, Dave You Fool, you could do worse than to study Dave You Fool. Just seems to be, and quite something that I think a lot of people can agree with. A lot of people across different styles, like for example, myself and Harry Blank, we both agree very clearly that Dave You Fool is, it's really going to be hard to find somebody who's better at this.
There's a few articles, there's at least one article where he gives a profile on a section of Corbinate. There's two of them that I know of that are by Dave You Fool and one that isn't. And they're all great because they have all of these world-building details that are still just a delivery system for being clever and crazy and scary and funny, but they make the whole thing crazier and more believable. This starts out...
See, once again, like, great point. Absolutely great point. The world building is sort of a vehicle to get to something else. Well, I feel like some of these articles that I've already mentioned, when I read them, the world building is there for its own sake. It's there for basically, it's basically like the, Star Wars group writing session sort of vibe and assumption that every little detail in this world building is going to be noticed and, salivated over and, sort of worshipped by the readers who are into this lore. And so you kind of get this like anticipatory fawning from the authors who expect their audience to just like go crazy with all these like little lore, bites, these little lore snacks that they put all in their works. But I mean, it's really only impressive insofar as in direct proportion to how much of a fanboy or girl or whatever you already are of this stuff. And when it comes to, maybe capturing new audience members or impressing somebody who's not going to be wooed or duped by something like that, you instead get, once again, just an oversaturation of exposition, just sort of flooding the pores of the article.
Being a weird desert with big monkeys in it. That's the first thing you read. and then it just goes nuts at a crazy pace after that.
Cool.
No, I'm just queuing up the next one so that I can actually read stuff directly from it because it's just too good to just summarize. So
This one's one of the more popular ones.
And
In fact,
it's
it's got one of the longest collab logs on the wiki.
See if we can
just
do this.
incredible. And that's why I don't feel bad because the collab logs are so good. We're not going to read any of those. But
my bad.
it's SCP-3922.
Rest
And
in
I'm just going to read some of the
rest in
description because
peace,
it's just
headphone
great.
users. What did he say?
But it's SCP-3922, and I'm just going to read some of the description because it's just great. When placed within 1 meter of a television set or a computer, the anomaly will significantly alter the content of any fictional films, TV shows, online videos, or commercials.
God dang, man. Wikidot, you're killing us. You're killing us. What are we supposed to do here? We got to thumb up our butt. Okay, we're here. See, now we can go. God, Wikidot.
The anomaly will significantly alter the content of any fictional films, TV shows, online videos, or commercials, usually through the addition of actors in padded combat uniforms and gas vests. These additional elements, classified as -A, will impede and or punish any and all crimes, as perceived by -A instances, committed by the cast.
You know, this
The severity of this
feels
content-
remarkably already like Harry Blank's newest article, which is once again a joint venture between Totley and Vendor Cleed or whatever the heck that is. I have not read this article, obviously a very popular one, but it almost feels like this is ghostwriting Harry Blank's new article because it's just very, very similar in subject matter and tone, even from just a few lines.
is always reflective of the MPAA or FCC rating of the video. The instances
So they invade media.
I love that. Just little connections like this, you know, like little tracings between concepts that most authors probably wouldn't make. It's like dancing. This is going to be a really strange analogy, but it's like dancing and trying to choreograph the movements of your pinky with your right foot. I mean, it's just sort of like a conceptual synapse that most people aren't going to think of. You know, it's not really like an obvious direction for a choreography point of reference, but that's kind of what like Dave Ufold is doing. He's making these like, I mean, they're there for anybody to make, but who's going to make them besides someone like Dave Ufold?
To police it.
right, and the fictional world of it. So these dash instances are capable of appearing in live action and animated works, often taking on the particular animation style of the latter. However, regardless of the time period portrayed in the video, these instances are always in possession of high-powered energy-based weaponry, vehicles capable of interstellar flight, combat drones, and other futuristic elements, all of which bear the same triple moon insignia. At the end of every video, an altered end title card will play in the place of any end credits, including the triple moon symbol as well as the symbol.
Yeah, I mean, this is. I mean, okay. I'm gonna go through the nice interpretation here and say that Harry Blank's newest article is an homage to this. You know, because we're even talking about at the end of every video, you know, section cards, title cards. It's all here. It's almost like he took the dish and he deconstructed the salad and then just rearranged it on the plate a little differently. But my God, there are certainly worse things that you could be paying homage to.
And then there's the table to end all tables.
Right. And, you know, there is a collaborative log where you could click through at the end of the article and see just a whole bunch of people have added brilliant examples. But here are a few that he included in the article itself. Pinocchio, 1940. The interference point is the Pleasure Island sequence shortly before the reveal that the boys have turned into donkeys. Result. Several -A squadrons raid Pleasure Island from dropships, reconstituting the children's humanity with a sound-based device labeled Tactical Undonkification Ordnance. And the coach...
That gets me every time.
It's so good! And the coachman is instantly vaporized after a heavy energy rifle bombardment. So they shot this dude so many times he vaporized. The film...
All right, so this one, once again, the new Harry Blank article. DJ Cactus is one about... it's the one that he wrote with Kinch. He didn't actually write with Kinch. He later added Kinch on as a guest writer in order to compensate for a loss of upvote average totals due to the Pride controversy downvoting. Hugo. Was it Hugo Chavez? It was not Hugo Chavez. Anyway, that one. And then The Great Hippo's early Series 5 one about Don Quixote. I love it when articles make tables like this and use pop culture works to sort of retcon in a very kerneled like fashion, where they just take portions of it and then just totally fuck with it. So yeah, good shit.
And 10 minutes later, after Lampwick is taken to a substance abuse rehabilitation center, the other villains of the film are arrested in a montage. Monster the Whale is disintegrated by an orbital energy weapon. The Blue Fairy is arrested for unlicensed reanimation of plant tissue, and Pinocchio is informed by a tactical child psychiatry associate that real boyhood is subjective.
Yeah.
The first one is the best one.
So once again, we see just the depth of the philosophical play here. There's more philosophical play. There's more philosophical meat to bite into in this line than there is in something like SCP-6747 or SCP-6488. Probably because it's not trying as hard. That's probably one part of it. But yeah, this is just absolutely delicious. I mean, who in their right mind would look at the subject material of Pinocchio and, insert a child psychiatrist to discuss the ontological, stability of something like the word real. I mean, Dave U. Fool would, so that's good that he did that for us.
So good all the way through.
Oh, God, it's just so fucking funny. But
they're so funny.
I'm not going to read them all. I'm just going to read the last one.
Can I do one?
Yeah. Which one are you going to read?
I was going to do the last one.
Yeah,
the last one's my second favorite. He knows how to bookend his shit, man. Dave U. Fool knows how to start and end well.
Look at that.
Just like pornography should. This one's about pornography. All 12 inches, 3 exclamation points.
Harry Blank, don't tell us that that's your favorite one, man. That's not... Don't do that, man. Come on, dude. I mean, obviously it's for the writing, right? It's for the good writing.
1999. This one's not rated because it's pornography. And right from the beginning, the intervention begins. Video proceeds as normal, save for the 7-A instances who stand guard to ensure that any sex remains consensual. Said -A instances are equipped with rocket launchers.
Just the idea.
I mean, that would do it.
I mean, there's nothing sexier than being surrounded by soldiers with rocket launchers.
But it will absolutely ensure that it all remains
What kind of rocket launchers are you talking about?
above board.
But, and we've only read 2. He's included 3 others, and there's a whole nother log. There's a really extended one for one of the ones in the article. I really suggest you read it, because it's just the funniest thing I've ever seen. And this one's very popular. Like you said, it's in the 500s, but still, it should be the most popular article in the book.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Every article. This one's at 564
This
as I
is
look at it
long.
right now, assuming the Wikidot rating is exactly correct, which usually it isn't,
My
because
God.
Wikidot is dying. But yeah, 564 is
Oh, look
still
at
way
that.
too
Isn't
low.
that funny that he said that on today's show? Let's go back and hear that. How prophetic.
Every article. This one's at 564 as I look at it right now, assuming the Wikidot rating is exactly correct, which usually it isn't, because Wikidot is dying. But yeah, 564 is
It
is
is
still
dying,
way too low.
isn't it?
It's way too low.
I just want to take a second to shill about this is a Conflict Magazine website, which is of course the business that we run, the site that we run. We're gonna take a little detour here, just to be a little topical for a second, and see what this about page says. Conflict Magazine is yada yada yada, and its goals are as follows. And then this number 6, I want y'all to notice this. This has been up since the site went up, which was essentially October of 2021. Be a catchnet and multi-site hub of community information as a node for enthusiasts, especially in anticipation of and after the future collapse or dissolution of the major conflict communities on Wikidot. So all that to toot my own horn and our site's horn, but more importantly, to tell you that if you haven't thought of a contingency plan about your work on things like Wikidot, now might be a wake-up call. The alarms should be ringing for you to find a way to get your stuff secured. Don't make it super custodial, and what I mean by that is you need to have your own works somewhere. Mine are all backed up; they're all archived. I have every single article I've ever written is still going to exist, even if Wikidot never comes back. And then while you're at it, why don't you check out this article that we wrote in November of 2021 about alternative wiki platforms for conflict communities. This was something that we have been thinking about and anticipating for quite a long time. So, people made fun of us about being preppers, and I guess there's some funny humor in that too. But there's nothing funny about the fear of Wikidot maybe not coming back. So just I hope it does. If you set yourself up to be ready for something like this, it's always not really a consolation to tell people that we told you so. But this should really maybe be the moment where you decide to at least do something about your work so that it's not essentially going down with the ship.
Internet points don't matter, but I just think more people should read this article.
I want Dave, you fool, to get more internet points.
So there's some other articles, one of which is the Jim Henson one, which we mentioned a couple times, which I'm not going to describe that much of it. It's SCP-4922. But basically what it is about a series of remote-controlled animate drones that all...
I fucking love Jim Henson, by the way.
Except for they are equipped with, like...
Jim Henson did, obviously, the Muppets. He did The Dark Crystal, which if you've not seen that, I think it's on Netflix. This looks like a kid's show, but it's absolutely not. And it has wonderful villains called Skeksis that are just a fantastic metaphor for so many types of people. You should definitely do it. I think The Labyrinth was also Jim Henson. And then one that you might not know that he was involved on TV sitcom, The Dinosaurs, from the 90s. Don't know if you remember this. These guys right here, I'm sort of dating myself, I know. But this is kind of it. It's sort of like a cheeky sitcom kind of thing. And you may not know this, but the individual who voiced the mother on this show is Jessica Walter, who you may also know from something like Arrested Development. And I think I got through like 3 seasons before my brain like clicked and was like, oh my God, that's Lucille Bluth. So obviously rest in peace. I hadn't known that she died until I looked her up after seeing her on the show. What a loss.
Some of the most heinous weaponry imaginable, like, Gatling guns and laser rifles and like disintegration rays. And they have an interview with one of them, and the doctor says, "Can I talk to somebody who's in charge?" And they said, "Sure, just hold on a second." And they transfer it to Colonel James Henson of the Three Moons Initiative, etc., assassination force or something. And he went, "Wait." The doctor goes, "Wait, Jim Henson?"
As in Jim.
That's like your hippie version of me.
It's funny because his brother was the one who produced that dinosaur show. I think they just used his puppets, but yeah.
I'm James. And it turns out
there he is,
this
James.
is Jim Henson from another universe who got captured by the Witch Queen of Borgle Mountain and was digested and got shit out and then got told to come back when he had some seasoning. And he did not deal well with this and has become essentially a psychotic murderer who
That's
just
funny, man.
targets people on the basis of, he kills killers with Muppet drones.
Yes.
And as we kind of spoiled it earlier, but as he's talking to the doctor asks about, what the capabilities are or something about their facility or offers him a job. I can't even remember what it is. And Jim just says, "Hold on, I'll give you a tour," and then explodes, killing the doctor because obviously he will then be transported to Korvik and then Jim Henson can give him the tour. But just the idea that there's an alternate universe Jim Henson who is an immortal killer who still makes Muppets, except for the Muppets are killer robots, is just incredible.
Yeah. Whoa! What the hell was that? Oh my gosh. Rest in peace, headphone users. Come on, guys. That's okay. My main complaint about this podcast, we're almost through episode 4. We've heard, I think, 2 together. We listened to 3 back in the day. And I really do like this podcast. I am not a fan of parts of it. For example, the hosts are not my favorite people, I guess I'll say, with one of them very regularly grinding my gears on very many ways. But the show is just so exceptionally educational. I don't know of any other podcast that really takes this depth of a dive into material. I think a lot of it is the other podcasts that sort of go into material are either verbatim reads or they're a little more like 101 classes. This really gets into some of the higher level coursework for, let's say, these canons and these GOIs. And then the other thing that I think I really would would change about this podcast that is just an over and over again problem is the mixing, the audio mixing. The people who are mixing this, or rather maybe not mixing this, don't have a very good grip on the dynamics of the podcast. So you have these very strong swells of, let's say, the background vaporwave synths suddenly interrupting like what we just heard. And the individual's voices will sort of have too much of a dynamic range with respect to volume. You know, you need to put an EQ on there. You need to put a limiter. You need to put a compressor. And you probably need to normalize the thing. I mean, those are at least 4 steps that you need to do to every single one of these podcast episodes, because the audio production, I think, is one of the weaker points of it. Now, having said that, everything that I have to say bad about this podcast is not enough to keep me from listening to it, so that's really a compliment to the strong portions of this podcast, which, once again, I think are the educational value. It's just astounding. Love it. There's like an intermission, like we're 20 minutes out from ending.
We had a bit of technical difficulty.
See, listen to that. Listen how quiet it is now. Now I gotta.
Yeah, I wonder. I can't wait to hear your side of it. Actually,
It sounded like.
I gotta play the volume knob like it's an instrument.
perfect.
I don't know what you were doing. I think
Someone
you might have
having
been
a stroke?
imitating Chewbacca.
Don't do that.
I mean, he is pretty great. So
Yeah.
well, anyway.
Okay.
So Jim Henson murders people. Anyway.
Yes, indeed. And also in SCP.
Exactly.
So there's another SCP that I just think people should go and read, which
Okay.
is SCP-5298,
It's
which
beautiful.
are inhuman drones that are shaped like children that are set up with fake families, like cover families, as if they're a deep cover agent. And then they have a specific mission, and I think people should just read it.
You do need to read it. You need to see what the mission is, and you need to see what kinds of fake children. these
Argus.
are. It's
What the,
inspiring.
hey, what the hell is Argus? Do y'all know what that is? I really need the wiki to be up so I can look that up. But I've seen Argus around. I just, man, come on. Doesn't that necessitate a footnote? Can't you help a brother out? Come on.
My absolute favorite part of it, without giving away anything, is that the parents have clearly been in the situation for a while, the parents in quotes, and are like, what are you doing in there?
Timmy.
Even though they're fake parents. It's the funniest. It's so good.
Timmy is always the name of the slightly comedic throwaway kid. Always.
It's a great article. It's another case where one anomaly is just not enough for him.
Yeah.
He introduces it with this one thing, and it's like, here's the thing that's weird, and then just incidentally, there's another whole other weird thing going on.
He does that so well. It's just so incredible. And the last one we want to talk about, unless you've got any others you want to talk about, is SCP-5319, which is essentially a music composition. There's 2 parts of it. There's the instrumentals, and there's the first, what they understand to be the first lines of the national anthem of the 3 Notes Initiative. And here's a bit from the
that's good.
description. When the SCP is exposed in any form to an orangutan, the specimens will burst into flames. The fire is only capable of being extinguished once the song ends.
Very
So
interesting.
you can't even put out the fire. So someone somehow got this to a guy who used it on the zoo. Used it at the zoo. He worked at the zoo, and he used it to kill the orangutan.
That's another thing about Dave U. Fool that he does well. I think we all, as I'm speaking to you as if you're an author, we all have these like really odd thoughts sort of pass through our heads as if clouds that are like, like maybe you can turn that into like an SCP, where it's like the anomaly is something just like really, really freaking weird. But I think for most people, those really weird like 3 sort of 4-word like anomaly sentences, they sort of like, they're like clouds. They're a little nebulous. They're hard to grasp, and they seem to be floating like kind of way over there. And who knows if you'll get them? Who knows if you'll actually keep the shape that you thought you saw in the cloud that changes very quickly. But Dave U. Fool seems to be doing this very well. He seems to just it's almost like he's rich in anomalous generation, like anomaly generation, where he's like, oh yeah, he can just start up a new anomaly like anywhere, like with anything. It's like, okay, yeah, so we're just gonna, it's a song and it incinerates an orangutan, and somehow we're gonna make a really good article out of that, like right now. So,
And then he was killed by the horseshoe crab. The email is found on his computer.
and they're short, they're short, they're punchy. You don't have to like, once again, I'm not trying to rag on this, but it's too convenient of a point of contrast here. These like admonition articles, and things like pataphysics that like really, really try very hard to be deep. I mean, they bill themselves as high concept things. The more you have to sort of bill yourself like that, the more explanation, the more exposition, the more voluminous your description of how it is that what you're talking about is deep has to be, the less deep it is. And so, once again, you've got this short, punchy thing here that accomplishes what other articles don't do in 10 times the word count. I mean, it's something to notice and it's something to appreciate.
Which he couldn't have possibly gotten because he was found dead, or probably. It has come to our attention that you have used Homo sapiens invictus as a means to murder the orangutans of your admittedly unpleasant employer. Animal cruelty is bad enough, but unauthorized use of our intellectual property is an immediately actionable offense. As
That's
such,
funny.
you will be summoned to Lunar Major for a preliminary disciplinary hearing in 30 minutes. Thank you for your cooperation. And
love
then he's
that.
murdered by them so that he can show up for court.
That's
They're
funny,
very
man.
good. Their summon's worth 100%.
And the Foundation decides to send an email to the Horseshoe Crab asking, well, why does this happen? When you play the song, why does it ignite orangutans? And they played a little bit of the language, the orangutans' reaction to it, because they tested, of course, the Foundations of Monsters. And Dr. Goldthwait only stated that SCP-5319 has confidential defensive characteristics. And Dr. Goldthwait is the person who sent the previous email as well. And so that, in my opinion, because they say they're not sure
Look at this.
why you're...
Look at this. At the end, it's almost like he's like, yeah. Grace be with you. Yeah. Under his eye. Like it's you're watched / protected / loved. And that's just one thing that I mentioned earlier that I love seeing about these articles and this 3 initiatives things. Like there's always some slight variation, at the end there that's sort of tailored. This one is pretty funny. It's almost like the guy just wants, it's like, whichever of these is fun. Either or all of them. I don't know. Whatever you want. Just pick one, pick 2, grab 3. I don't know.
You're so interested in the Strider language, but it's kind of disturbing. So that basically
It's
tells
clever.
you the Striders are giant orangutans.
Yes, and in fact, when the Foundation tests it on orangutan, the orangutan makes a lot of horrified vocalizations, and they send that to Corbinick, and Corbinick responds going, I don't know how you found Strider language, but it basically translates to, there's been a misunderstanding, I'm not what you think I am. So the
Oh, no,
orangutan
man.
knows that they think it's a Strider and they're trying to light it on fire with a song.
Oh, okay. I see.
So, I mean, we've only covered, we covered a lot of articles, but very quickly, because I really don't want to give everything away, and even the ones where they end on a one-liner, that isn't even everything to offer from these articles. They are just chock full of weird details.
I don't think they're
and hilarious
one-liners.
Anecdotes.
I'll say it
The one
again.
with the radio broadcast has like 4 or 5 other snippets that are just...
Maybe they are one-liners, but the one-liner has been given such a bad rep now, in I guess Series 6 basically, or sorry, Series 7 basically, that I don't want it to be true for this. I definitely see them as totally different. So, I mean, if it is a one-liner, then it's in a completely different ballpark.
terrific world building, but also utterly ridiculous if you're somewhat aware of what Corbinick is.
Absolutely. There's all the tales, the SCPs, there is really no way to go wrong with any of this stuff. You pick any of them, and they will astonish you.
And I think it's important to mention that Dave Uful is a recent published author.
Oh, is he?
He has 2 books
Yes.
out. I haven't finished the
good.
first one, but I haven't touched the second one. But
That's awesome.
It's about,
Oh, that's an excellent endorsement. Well done.
well, I just have been busy. I don't know. I'm terrible. But I will say that it is hilarious. And essentially the premise is, he can
What's the
understand
name of the
better, but
book?
Essentially the premise is that this is a fantasy world that exists on the basis of...
What's the name of the
rules
book?
Of a tabletop RPG.
Come on, guys.
So if you are a sword fighter, you have to level up your ability to be a sword fighter. And that's just the basic premise. I'm not giving anything away about the story itself.
Come on,
but it
guys.
is chock full of the same thing, where it is just utterly ridiculous and hilarious.
Maybe I missed the
and yet
title.
Really subtle and brilliant world building, like from the get-go. Like in the first chapter, there's a fight, and the fight is described in the same way if you've ever played D&D between two player characters fighting like rolling dice. Only they don't actually roll dice.
Yeah, I've never played D&D. Never, not once. I think that's probably at the depth. It's probably the root cause of why, there's such a cultural difference between me and SCP on the whole. Like, we didn't get along very well. Like we didn't like each other very much. Like it's sort of a mutual thing, and whatever that reason is, deep down, deeper down than what's apparent. I think it has something to do with the fact that I'm the kind of person who never played D&D ever. So that probably is a tragic flaw, to most, I would say, in this space.
It's fucking terrific.
We'll always try to point that kind of thing out because a few of our better authors have become writers and in a commercial sense, and they deserve it.
Yeah, so it's great to notice that, but I would push back against the idea that being a published author or writing something that is published is necessarily somehow more of an achievement than what, let's say, somebody wrote on the SCP Wiki. I think that Kalinin said this, and I think that it's very true, that the SCP format has the potential to sort of, introduce some sort of obsolescence to the older, sort of traditional mediums of writing. Sort of like the novel is kind of a tired thing, and this collaborative wiki project is sort of the new novel. It's sort of the next step in the evolution of literary genres. And I think that's true in a lot of ways. I think Kalinin was talking specifically about it being a collaborative project that everyone sort of contributes a small little portion to. But I think that's true in a lot of ways, actually, more ways than what Kalinin was just talking about structurally, with the fact that it's a collaborative writing experience and project. So, on that note, I think I'm not saying that people who write other things like books, Quantum has done this, Dave Uful has done this. A lot of people do other things like that. I'm not trying to take away from that at all. Those things do deserve to be applauded and recognized. But I would urge someone who's in this space to resist the idea, the sort of magnetized idea, that writing something other than what's written on the SCP Wiki is somehow a more official, a more legitimate form of publication, is a more legitimate literary product than what, say, someone like Dave Uful has written on the actual SCP Wiki. I think that there's still this sort of vestigial, faux reverence for those more traditional, forms of literary production. And that's great. Like I said, nothing against that. But it's like having a Ferrari that you can drive around, and someone being really proud of you for going really fast on your horse. It's like, okay, well, I don't think you understand what you got in front of you, man.
Your patronage, because they've given so much great stuff for free.
Yes. And also because
They
we
have.
want whatever God smiled on them to smile on them, so that it can also be published.
Yes, that's the.
Which-
those are the inside words, Grigori. You're not supposed to say them outside.
Who writes just for? I mean,
Call
unless
us.
you on the wiki. Yeah, please do.
What did he say? Let's go back.
Those are the inside
For God smiled on them to
So
smile.
apparently Grigori Karpin said a quiet part out loud. Let's see what that was.
stuff for free.
Yes. And also because we want whatever God smiled on them to smile on them, so that it can also be published.
Yes, that's the.
Which-
those are the inside words, Grigori. You're not supposed to say them outside.
Hey man, let me tell you something. Gray hair is not a crown of wisdom, okay? And your name in print is not an indication of literary quality. I hate to tell you that. There are a lot of really, really bad authors that are published. Hate to tell you that. I'm just trying to deconstruct this sort of hierarchical reverence for things other than what you have right in front of you at the SCP Wiki. That's all. Of course, that makes a big difference if you're trying to make a living off of your writing. That's a whole different story.
Who writes just for? I mean,
Call
unless
us.
you on the wiki. Yeah, please do.
I have 107 articles. Come on.
God damn, dude.
So,
Fuck. It's like somebody bragging as to how many STDs they have, and they're trying to tell you they're a good lover.
you mentioned on break that there might be a correction.
Yeah, we've
For
got
something we talked about.
We have our first errata. We talked about third law at the end of our discussion.
I remember that. I remember that
whenever-
third law discussion.
Last time period.
Literally a week ago.
It was a week ago. All right.
I would like to point out that in the last episode when they talked about the third law, and in this episode when they talked about the three moons, the point was made both times that these GOIs and the main authors of these GOIs are doing a great job because they blend so well a mixology of believability, like immersion, like, suspension of disbelief in with whatever other topics they're juggling. I just like to mention that because it seems to, if you look at least one of these individuals' works, doesn't seem to be something that is heated.
Time is meaningless. We float in an existential horror space. But anyway, Green Wolf, the founder of the Third Law canon, felt it
Green Wolf is also published. Green Wolf did. We talked about it on SCP Meta or Conflict Call-In with Harmony one time. Harmony told us all about Green Wolf's. Green Wolf. Damn, what the hell was that thing called? It was like a werewolf journalist. That's what it was. Werewolf journalist. There it is. That's it right there. This is written by Green Wolf, and you can tell because it's right there. Newshound. Newshound is an ongoing urban fantasy web serial novel started in 2017 by M.T. Bade, a.k.a. Green Wolf, and updating fortnightly, which is a fucking hell of a way to update things. My God. Outclassed us all here in the schedule creating world. But so I'm not sure how far along this is. I do believe that we discussed how most of the tropes on this site, this page dedicated to it, I think was written by Green Wolf themselves. So, there's that. If you're interested in checking out other things that other SCP authors have written outside of the wiki, this is maybe a little more low-key, a little less sung of an example.
is necessary, and I agree wholeheartedly to ask for a elucidation of who actually founded the canon and who later contributed to it, because the way we chose to handle it was to go, I think it was, and then list the people whose names came into our head, which didn't give full credit to all of the people who have helped Green Wolf and who have written their own series within Third Law and who were originally there.
This makes me want to do aerobics.
Because we undercharacterized the team behind it, I'm now going to overcharacterize the team behind Third Law. The original 4 authors were Green Wolf, A Random Day, Ty Gently, and Sir Pudding, and they were later joined by Taffeta, Jacob Conwell, Chewbacca, Nat Voltaic, Stonefish, the Great Hippo, Chaosera, Anorak, Tawny, their editor, and Crashington, who was the illustrator for the Tale series I pointed you towards last time, the Phoenix, Nightingale, and the Magpies.
Cool.
Which I've since read entirely. And Green Wolf, if you listen to this, I need more Florence. Okay? She's amazing, and I need more of her.
Well, actually, on that note, Green Wolf has new...
Let's finish this. We've got 7 minutes left. We've gone a little over tonight. No big deal. But just in the interest of tidying things up in a nice bow in preparation for our 3-hour gauntlet stream tomorrow night covering the SCP articles of this week, although we will have a reduced count. Thank you, Wikidot. Let's just get through this.
U-Tales that are out in Third Law that are available right now on the wiki. Anorak also has a new article out, and the Third Law stories that are in PNM continue elsewhere, and there's always new content at a very high quality being produced for the canon, so get out there and read new stuff.
When we get to canons, that is definitely when we'll go into much bigger detail. In my defense, when I was writing the outline for the last one, we were very focused on GOC, and I just kind of was focused on those articles that I read and looked at and their authors. So, we apologize for anybody we forgot.
You ain't got to apologize,
man. This is what
It's
happens when you
ain't got to apologize.
Extemporaneously expound. You start going on tangents that you have not properly researched. And so that's why we were both like, I think
nobody's perfect, man.
Right.
But yes, all of these authors are excellent. So,
and any time that happens, we'll want to.
Your credentials are not voided.
For the most part,
it's okay.
I do like to cite who's actually writing the article in the outline. But
yeah, because the general invisibility of authors is kind of a problem. We want to give these people the credit for the work that they did, because the work that they do is incredible, just as we've been saying, Dave, you fool, over and over again.
Yeah. That whole invisibility of authors thing is sort of an excuse for people to shield themselves, I think, on the back end of the intention. Not to say there aren't good intentions there. It's just that some people are on the bandwagon for ulterior reasons.
I think in general, something that I would like to, preach, out into the ether of the offsite fans who, clearly love this stuff and really appreciate it. None of this stuff, none of the TikTok or YouTube videos or video games would exist without the wiki, and none of that would exist without the authors. So, I'm not saying it's more important. I don't think that. But I do think that we should do everything in our power to, give credit where credit's due, especially when people like Green Wolf and A Random Day and, Quantum and many others, including yourself and myself, have sacrificed literally hundreds of hours to write things for free.
Yeah, I mean, it's all...
Completely fuck you, man. I hate to do this right now because we're so close to being done, but fuck you. Because you guys took that sentiment that just came out of your mouth and ripped it to shreds when someone who gave 10 times the amount of life that you have given asked y'all to honor a time-tested, time-upheld tradition on your site. And when it came time for y'all to walk the walk and not just talk the talk, you deferred the principle, things that change based on the context are not principles. So you deferred the principle because it was going to be somewhat painful for you. So take those words out of your mouth. My God.
All free stuff that's out there for building
Reeks. Smells like a corpse.
on for reading, and it's always nice to drop people a line, and it's always nice to point other readers towards these people. So that's kind of what we've just been doing this whole time, is telling.
Well, that's the entire point of the podcast, in my opinion. Well, one of them. Anyway.
There's a point to this.
Well,
oh man, I don't want to be a part of this anymore.
But I mean, from the very first time, I've said over and over again that I want to curate. And I think that, like I said earlier on in one of the earlier shows, it's very intimidating to see this thing of 14,000 articles of different shapes and sizes. Where do I start? Well,
yeah.
If you find this interesting, here's some
articles
to read, and then from there you can expand.
Yeah. What is actually the number of the dog SCP? If people are interested in Davey Fool, we should give them the dog.
I don't know.
I'll quietly type that into the to Google while we continue to.
Okay.
While you read some email.
So we got an email from Guare, who sends an email I think almost every time, which is excellent. Thank you. And they say, first of all, I would like to say that this podcast is quickly becoming one of my favorites. Thank you. That is very appreciated. I also would like to say to Gregory that I've been reading some of his articles and really liking them. I wouldn't have read that if I'd read those ahead of time. Thank you. I don't like blowing up my own shit, but thank you. That's very sweet. And I do very much appreciate the engagement. But now for the actual comment, which is actually in the email. I'm so excited for the next episode to be about the Three Moons Initiative. They quickly became one of my favorite GOIs after discovering them, and I always was disappointed that more people didn't do more with them. Also, probably amongst the least known offsite. So that likely has something to do with it. I hope you like it too after the research, because for me, it, alongside Corbinic, is one of the most creative and interesting parts of the wiki. We didn't even have to do research. We just read all this shit again because
every one
had.
Because there's so much fun. I read them all when I wrote for 6500, and then I read them all again yesterday.
Yeah.
I love how these guys are like, we don't like to shill our own shit. We don't like to toot our own horn. And then I think SCP-6500 has been mentioned like 10 times in this episode, just FYI.
I don't know. I think I don't know if you'd already decided, but
Needlessly.
remember when you were talking about writing, I need some place, and I was like, you gotta go to Corbinic. And I know because the first part of 6500, you had like gone to so many places that it got kind of trimmed. And then so brilliantly, when we decided to write a whole another half a novel, you were like, well, I guess I know where I'm going.
Yeah, I had already plugged in the story seed for Corbinic, but there was just no room because I had already written 10,000 words. I was like, well, you can't just briefly go to Corbinic. That would be just offensive.
Once again, who has meshed Corbinic and the End of Death hub? Who's done that? I'm sure somebody's done that.
So I think that's going to do it for us.
The dog SCP. I'll just throw this one here because I got it up quietly while you were talking. That sounded wrong. But anyway, it's SCP-4587. This is one we haven't spoiled at all, but it's incredibly premium Davey Fool. So SCP-4587. It's hilarious.
We're sort of spoiling it because it eventually becomes part of the Three Moons Initiative, but at the beginning it seems to have no connection whatsoever. But just stick with it.
4587. It's rated at plus 132, which is honestly a crime against humanity. So go read it. It's amazing. It's some of my favorite.
Thanks.
It's so good.
All right, let's hit this up. Let's finish this shit.
So good.
All right,
blast
so our email
off.
is simplycreativepeople@gmail.com.
Man, you guys should send in more emails to these guys.
I
think they only had one.
The show's Twitter
And half of it was a
SIMCREAT.
Was a brown nose.
At Harry Blank SCP.
And I think that's going to do it for us. Next week we are 100% going to do Fifithism. And
cool,
I don't understand
cool.
Fifithism, so it's going to be very interesting. I mean, I really like what I've read, but I don't know if you are ever meant to understand it, so that'll be really good.
It's going to be wonderful.
Can't wait.
Okay, well then we will see you next time.
You are watched. You are protected. You are loved.
Shit out of Alexa.
That was a good way to end it. I'll give him that. That was nice. Okay. Well, so we finished it. That was awesome. Thanks for hanging in there a little longer than we usually go just to finish that. So, the Three Moons. I had no freaking idea what it was when we started this, and now I think it's pretty fucking cool. So I hope the same is true for you. I think that Dave U. Fool is probably one of the more talented people writing on the wiki. I think you probably agree with me there. Once again, happy to be back with Simply Creative People. They kind of scratch that itch, educationally, which I think is nice. I don't know where we'll go next. I think what we'll do next is check out Dr. Sumerian. See a couple of his videos on his YouTube that I think I've seen portions of, and that I think would be nice to react to. At least one of them is going to be a dank meme video that he does. I've never watched one, so I kind of wonder what the meme quality is there. So we'll see what that is. But that won't happen until 2 weeks from now. So I got an announcement to make, which is that my family and I are going on a spontaneous vacation to the beach next week. I know I was just out last week, but that was for a funeral. So, hey, that wasn't a vacation. So we are going to the beach next week, so we will not have our nightly streams next week. Usually we would do Monday, Tuesday, and like tonight, Thursday, but we will not do that. That is the week of the 23rd. So we will, on that week, the 27th, do our Friday stream, the 3-hour gauntlet of the SCP Wiki articles that came out that week. And we will do this week's tomorrow night, so 7:30 p.m. CST. Join us for that. I don't know if Wikidot will be up. If Wikidot is not up, it's going to throw a wrench in it, because usually we're looking at the articles as we talk about them. I have my notes on them, so, worst case scenario, we'll just kind of have to get through it. I'm not sure. It may be a shorter stream because, Wikidot kind of interrupted the flow of articles. We have a lower number than we usually do, but it should be interesting. So join us for that time. If you're not doing nothing, come hang out, see what you want. If you've read some articles this week, I'd be more than interested to hear your take, or your disagreements, or your, echoes of what I will say about these articles. So, once again, thanks for hanging out a little longer than usual. That's what this schedule is going to look out to be the next week or so. Do join us on Saturday for our SCP Meta stream. That's 11 a.m. CST for an hour. You can call us on our number to share your questions, criticisms, comments. Just let your voice be heard in general. That's where we'll talk about a lot of these things that have been happening recently, Dr. Bright, and of course the whole Wikidot thing now. Just never a dull day in the containment fiction space. So thank you all very, very much for joining. I hope you had a wonderful time tonight. Thank you to our source content of Simply Creative People. Thank you to the hosts. On the whole, I think you'll do an excellent job. This has been SCPCRNP, a.k.a. Lack of Lepers, and I will see you tomorrow night. Have a good one. Thanks.